In 1939, a baby born with a split upper lip could be flagged for death by the state, but the doctors who did it buried the paperwork for decades, and the reason why is darker than the killing itself. You know the word Harelip? Old, blunt, almost cruel, the medical term for what we now call a cleft lip. A birth defect. Common, fixable, nothing more than a line where the mouth didn't quite close before birth. That's what you were taught if you were taught anything at all. What you weren't taught is that this same minor defect once sat on an official list, a list that decided who lived. In August of 1939, the Nazi government quietly created something called the Reich Committee for the Scientific Registration of Severe Hereditary Diseases. A clinical name, a bureaucratic name, designed to sound boring. Its actual job was simple. Midwives and doctors across Germany were ordered to report newborns and young children with visible physical malformations, facial deformities, limb deformities, anything that marked a child as defective under the regime's genetic theories. A cleft lip, a Harelip, fell inside that net. Not because it was dangerous, because it was visible. Because someone could look at a baby's face and decide on sight that this child didn't belong in the future they were building. Here's the part that doesn't make it into any textbook. The reports didn't go to a hospital committee. They went to a panel of 3 doctors who never examined the children in person. They reviewed paperwork, a description, maybe a photograph, and they marked a symbol on the form, a plus sign or a minus sign. Nothing more. That single mark decided whether a child was sent to one of roughly 30 special pediatric wards set up across the country. Wards with a name that sounded like care. Kinderfachtabteilung, children's specialty units. Inside them, an estimated 5,000 children were killed, starved, sedated into pneumonia, or given lethal doses of phenobarbital. Some of those children had no disability that affected their minds at all. Some of them simply had a face that didn't close all the way before birth. And it gets stranger the further you look, because this wasn't unique to Germany. That's not even the strangest part. Years before any of this, American eugenicists were writing the exact same logic into law. In 1924, Virginia passed a sterilization act built on model legislation from a man named Harry Laughlin, and 3 years later the Supreme Court upheld it in Buck versus Bell. Over 60,000 Americans were sterilized under laws like it. Eugenics researchers of that era openly described visible facial irregularities, a cleft lip among them, as what they called stigmata of degeneracy. Physical proof, they claimed, of hidden hereditary rot. A face was read like a warning label, but here's what doesn't add up. If this was real medical science, if these programs were built on hereditary evidence, the records should still exist. Peer-reviewed, defensible. Instead, after the war, the Reich Committee's files were scattered, destroyed, or sealed. Most of the doctors who signed those death marks were never charged. Several went back to practicing pediatric medicine in West Germany, treating children for decades under their own names. Nobody flagged them. Nobody asked what those plus and minus signs had meant. That's the buried why. It was never really about disability or genetics or even harm. It was about who got to decide what a normal body looked like. And once that power existed on paper, it was quietly protected on both sides of the Atlantic because too many respected institutions had signed their names to it. Prosecuting the doctors meant admitting that eugenics wasn't a fringe Nazi delusion. It was mainstream science, taught in American universities, cited in American courtrooms, printed in American textbooks, years before Germany ever wrote a single form. Erasing the Reichsausschuss meant erasing an uncomfortable mirror. So instead of trials, there was silence. Instead of records, there were gaps. The story didn't disappear because it was small. It disappeared because too many powerful names were attached to it. Think about what that means for everything else stamped, settled science in your old textbooks. Eugenics wasn't some isolated horror confined to one regime and one decade. It was a working theory, funded, published, and legislated that treated a child's face as legible proof of their worth. And when it collapsed, the people who built it didn't vanish. They just stopped using the word. So here's the question nobody's answered. If those doctors kept practicing under their own names after the war, how many of their patients ever found out what they'd done before?